But let me explain why I don't think we're in for another depression like the Great Depression, okay? The Great Depression, if you looked at it and you looked at all the facts and figures and the lead up to it and all the things, it looked very similar, if not the same as what we're seeing now and what we saw in 2008. The difference was in 1929, the Fed was defending the gold standard, and therefore they kept raising interest rates, which caused massive deflation, and it wrecked the system. And that took years, and in fact, probably a decade in most cases, to actually recover from that. Yeah. So that was what happened back then. The distinction now is this, that what we've done is the opposite. We've injected massive amount of money to promote spending, which has created the opposite thing. So basically what's happened is it's not a case of, what happened there is what happened there. The reaction was totally different, the opposite of it. And actually, I think that has been a much better, and I've been very complimentary to the government for doing this. And not just the UK government, but a lot of governments around the world have done exactly this and are getting exactly the same results. Now, we might say, well, hold on, we're in for a massive sting in the tail and we're going to kick in the ass later on, and we may well do that. They may well have spent too much money, borrowed too much money. However, let's talk about debt. Okay, because it's one thing to sit here and say, well, hold on, they're borrowing, GDP has gone up, debt to GDP has gone over 100% and this and that, which sounds terrible. Okay, and for you and I, that is terrible. Yeah, because if, our entire income for a year is this much, that much, and our debt goes from here to there, see, and this is the thing I'll point out. All right, if we have a look at debt to GDP, okay, so you can see this is the United States and Britain. I don't know why they didn't do UK, but at the end of the day, Britain is by far the biggest. So, no disrespect to Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, but the bottom line is the forecast. And if you have a look at those things in 2000, since 2000 to 2020, you'll see we're at about 80% in 2016, 88, 87%, I think. We've just crossed over, and I think I've got a slide here, where the UK in June of this year crossed over the 100% barrier. In other words, our debt to our GDP was the same, And obviously that was in June. So we've had July, August, September, October, November, and we're coming to November. So we've had 5 months of serious borrowing since then, all right? So, sorry guys, I don't know what that thing's there. But anyway, let's have a look at debt around the world. So if we have a look at the, debt around the world, Japan, 237%, Italy, 135%, United States, 106%. This is in 2018, all right? UK, 2018, sorry, it was, not 2016, 86.8%, So obviously that's gone from 86 to 100. Now, if you think about it, last recession, we decided to do austerity, and we kept austerity to just before the election, So interesting. If we have a look at debt around the world and debt as a percentage of GDP, so there's about 70 trillion worth of debt around the world. 31% of that is the United States. Then you got Japan, then China, and the UK is right down the bottom there at 3.5%. Now for the 5th or 6th largest nation in the world, that's, it's not ideal, but it's also not, not going to kill us, if you like. It potentially could if it got too high, all right? Now, here's the interesting thing. So many people talk about debt to GDP as being the be-all and end-all, but actually it's not. Because if we think about it, you've got to consider debt versus debt repayments over time, or over the term of the thing. Because what happens is, debt is the overall value. So we can say we owe, GDP is 20 billion and our debt is 20 billion. It's 100%, But the reality is, if that 100% is due in a year's time and that 100% is at 7% borrowing, or interest rate, that becomes an issue. But imagine if that was at 0.1% or 0.2%, over 20 or 30 years, okay, now that's a lot more affordable. So you've got to take, you've got to look at the right metrics. And actually, it's not necessarily about the level of debt. That is a consideration, but it's actually a lot more about the term of the debt, how long it's over. It's also the interest rate, and it is the level of debt. So there's different things. And I think you've got to account for all those. And when you account for all those, you start to build a slightly different picture than what the media may be giving you, okay? Now, I'm not saying that adding 40% of the money supply isn't going to have a kick in the tail. It may well do. We don't know that yet. But the interesting thing is, and one of the issues is that obviously GDP drops, which means tax revenue drops, which means, the income of the country drops, which means that debt, rises considerably above potentially what you're earning. So there's also that. We've had the borrowing and the income drop. Interestingly, if we look at China, okay, China has gone and they had a big drop, for them a massive drop because they've been growing at sort of, 7, that sort of 8, 9, 10%, that sort of thing. And then they've dropped into the negative, but they've gone straight back up to where they're 5% growth this year, 4.9 in Q3, which actually isn't all that bad. Yeah. So can we do that? Because we're seeing exactly the same thing here as Australia and Singapore and China, where they've actually been able to bounce back. Okay. And I think that's really interesting that these things happening, So guys, it's an interesting thing, but look, is 40%, this 40% are really concerned? The question is, over what period is it? And if we have a look at it, the interesting thing that I find, all right, let me just go there. Yeah, so the interesting thing I find with this is actually, when you have a look at it, a lot of the debt that's coming due now that needs to be refinanced is going to be refinanced at such a low interest rate that governments can afford to borrow more now because the rate is so low. If the rate was at 7% and they're having a remortgage at 7%, that's a serious consideration. But now if you're borrowing at 0.1%, or even negative it could get down to, which government bonds have gone down in negative, some of them. So, and you're borrowing over 5 or 10 years, it's not so much of a concern. And that's why there's a lot of people now, economists and that sort of stuff, saying, actually, do you know what? This is manageable. This is not a case of where we are definitely going to be screwed and we're going to, fall over and all that sort of stuff. So in some ways, it's not as bad as it's being made out in the media by a lot of things. And look, I'm on YouTube, okay? And we're playing with the YouTube algorithms now, and I'm putting videos out. I'm starting to work out what day I should put them in and all this sort of stuff. And I go on there and I have to shake my head because I look at, my contemporaries and, my peers and all that sort of stuff. And some of the stuff they're saying about how, we're in for an almighty crash and it's going to happen and we're predicting it. And 20%, 40% and the share market's going to drop and all this doomsaying. And the problem is some of these guys I know, some of these guys I chat with. And when I chat with them, they know that that's not necessarily going to be as bad. But you know what? Their YouTube rankings perform a hell of a lot better if you put a negative keyword. And the interesting thing is, and so I was chatting to the marketing team today, and we're saying, you know what, let's run for the next 2 weeks, not this week, next week, 2 weeks, let's put really negative, crash, housing crash 2021, or why the housing market will crash and that sort of stuff. Because that gets a lot more, and I'm talking in the region of tenfold more hits than just putting my house price predictions for 2021, or, it's not as bad as we might think for 2021, and unfortunately, that's the thing we live in right now. So things aren't as bad. Be sure to subscribe and press the like button. And if you've got any, questions, you can send them through to webinars@gladfish.com, and I'll be happy to record a video in response or include it in my weekly webinar, weekly live stream, I should say. But anyway, guys, have a fantastic day. And don't forget, live with passion, and we'll see you real soon. Bye.